What's going on, guys? All right, so a couple months ago I decided to build my first DIY desk. I didn't have that much experience with woodworking beforehand. I've done small projects and stuff like that, but I watched a ton of videos and I decided to just go through with it because my desk from before just wasn't cutting it. I'll be honest, I'm really happy with how it came out. I'll show you guys right now. Okay, so the desk came out to about 70 inches by 29 inches. For me, it doesn't feel too big. It feels almost just right. It gives me a good amount of space and actually gives us just enough space so that if Natalie has to come and work with me at the same time, she can pull up her laptop right next to me. We have two chairs, and so she can actually sit right next to me and we can both comfortably work on the same desk and not be like pushing each other or hitting each other's elbows or anything. Let's get back into the actual content of this video. I'm just gonna go through my entire build process, starting from start to finish. Again, not everything was documented perfectly. All right, so let's start with how I prepared myself for this. Again, after watching a ton of videos, I landed on a final idea, and this was the actual page that I drew out and wrote just like the kind of stuff that I was gonna go to Home Depot and buy. So I'm just gonna really quickly go through some of these and just tell you guys like the kind of things that I had to buy specifically for this table. I was definitely gonna need some pipe clamps to hold the boards together after I glued them, and so I got a couple from my dad, but then I had to buy I bought like two really long ones to make sure that I had enough all over the table and after we glued it, right? Next was the actual wood itself. Here I bought three 6-inch by 6 feet boards. It ended up being 4 of those because I thought 24 inches wide ended up being not wide enough, basically. And so I wanted it to be a little wider, and so that got bumped up to like 29 inches at the end. And then on top of that, I also bought these, I bought two 3-inch by 8 feet. They were almost like giant, like long sticks. I wouldn't even call them boards because they were kind of thin, but those ended up being the border. Next, I made sure that I wrote down to get wood glue. I really messed this up. I got an all-purpose glue, and all-purpose glue does not work the same as wood glue. Unfortunately, I wasn't completely aware of the difference, and I definitely messed that up because all-purpose glue is not as strong as wood glue when working with wood. Next, I said I was going to need to buy a power drill. This is just a really useful tool all the time, and I decided that I should get one for myself at this point. And then for the finish, I wrote here oil and urethane top coat, but I ended up just finishing with a Danish oil. Okay, and that was pretty much it for the preparation. So next, I basically just started bringing home all my supplies from Home Depot or whatever. I laid out a little space in my patio and started aligning all the wood. So when I felt pretty confident about the final design of the table, I went ahead and made the markings on the wood itself and prepared myself to glue these panels together and also screw on the bottom supports. I asked my cousin to come over and we did that part together. Unfortunately, I don't have footage of it, but here is the moment after we finished the gluing process. My cousin there is scraping off some of the excess glue, and here are some of the panels that help support. Seeing how this came out, we let it dry for about an hour or two, and then we decided to cut the edges, make them flush by using the support that we had underneath the table as the actual guide for this circular saw. That gave us a really nice flush edges on both sides of the table, and then we moved on to making the borders of the table. For this part, we had a creative decision to give the corners a 90-degree angle so that they would attach at 90 degrees. It turned out pretty cool. We messed up one side, and so we had to improvise and find a workaround, but I think overall it turned out really great. So here's the table that same night. With everything put together. I was really proud of it at this point. Even though it was kind of dirty and still needed the details, I was really happy with how it was turning out. So the next part was going to be sanding. and my brother and my cousin spent a good amount of time during the day sanding this, and then I came home that night and sanded a little bit more. And then the next morning I thought it was pretty ready to just start doing the final coats, and so here I am putting on a layer of the Danish oil. This is the very first layer of the Danish oil, right? And immediately after doing this, I realized that I had really screwed up with that glue. It had created these really ugly parts in between the panels that you could just so clearly see the glue, and it looked really, really bad. So I went back and had to start scraping out all those edges of the panels, in between the panels there, to try to get as much of that glue out. And it was just a really painful experience. I had to almost take a knife and just dig out and try to make those edges as flush as possible. And after doing that, of course, we had to go back to sanding. So I had to repeat this process again. This time again, I had to sand a little deeper because of how deep those grooves were, to make it just feel smooth, right? And so after a really long and painful day of sanding, I got to a final table that I was really happy with. That glue was almost completely gone. It was still visible in some of the edges, but it got to a point where if you stood back far enough, you almost couldn't even tell, and I was getting really happy again with how it was looking. I put on about 4 or 5 coats of the Danish oil that day, and that night, here is what it looked like. Let me just flip back and forth between the first time with the glue and without the glue, and just so you guys can see the difference. It was a huge difference. Anyway, the next morning I woke up nice and early and started screwing on the legs. I was so happy with how the desk was coming out, and at this point I could not be more excited. I flipped it over and I put on one last layer of the Danish oil with a little bit of sandpaper so that the wood could really just soak in all of that oil. And so with that, I had completed my very own DIY giant desk. Alright, so there you have my desk built, and again, I could not be more happy with how it came out, even though there was some really obvious and big mistakes. Just to go over a couple of them really quickly. The biggest one was definitely using the wrong kind of glue. Again, I can't stress that enough. I mean, it's such a stupid mistake too, because it's called wood glue. I should have made sure to get wood glue. Anyway, that was my biggest mistake. The second mistake I made, I didn't pre-drill some holes, or all the holes into the border part of the wood, and so there's these little there's the holes for the screws. I just went straight through, and that kind of cracked near the edges a little bit, and so that made it a little bit messier, but not a huge deal. And finally, and probably the smallest little nitpicky thing that I maybe would have done differently, is the final like coats and stuff. Maybe I should have done a little bit of a stainer. I think the wood looks really great, but stainer, and especially just going a little darker, would have brought out more of the grain, and also would have just helped for the desk to not get as dirty, or at least look as dirty as fast. And so in this video, again, it's just to show you guys that you don't need too much expertise. Get some friends. I mean, if you have anyone that does do construction or any kind of like carpentry or anything like that, maybe just ask them like, hey, I'm thinking about building this desk, like how would you recommend I go about it? What's the best tactics? Definitely just watch a lot of YouTube videos on like professionals, how they do it, and then try to figure out how you can do it your own way, because a lot of the methods I used, I saw professionals use in like these big workshops and stuff, and I was like working in my little patio, but I just kind of made do with what I had, and I think it came out really great. And so you don't have to be a professional to make a beautiful table. That's the whole thing. Well, that's it for this video. If you guys are new to this channel and like this kind of video, make sure to leave me a comment just letting me know if you dug it or not, because I don't know if I'm going to be doing more DIY stuff like this or just other random things. I'm actually a filmmaker, and so I kind of just do a little bit of everything with my channel, and right now I did this project and I just figured I'd throw together this video for you guys. Again, I was also really proud of it, and I think it might be able to help people looking to create or build their own DIY desk. All right, well, let me know what you think, and I will catch you guys next time. Peace out.